I was almost certain that I've seen everything that survival games have to offer, from a massively open world to uniquely chosen environment. I thought I've seen it all. But sometimes all it takes is just a little realism and you'll be hooked once again. Speaking of being hooked, let's talk about Subsistence. Subsistence was released in 2016 and has never left the beta state. So what is Subsistence, and is it even worth your time in 2022? Just a disclaimer, this title is worked and developed by a single man, unless he recently hired someone. As far as I'm concerned, this is a one-man battle. Before I dive straight into pros and cons, let me just save you some time right off the bat and just give you a disclaimer. I will compare this game a lot to Rust, so if you don't like Rust in general, you might as well just close this video now and just leave, because this game is a lot like Rust. Now, if you're still here and you're watching this video, I'm assuming that you find Rust interesting and you want to hear more about this game. Some people might argue that Subsistence is by far the hardest game they have ever played, and when they say hard, I'm more referring to a specific term in this case, which is in terms of grinding for resources, not necessarily surviving environmental challenges. Don't get me wrong, environment in Subsistence is challenging, but it's not nearly as punishing as DayZ is. There's currently no creative mode available, therefore you have to really grind and work for what it is that you want. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure you could just download third-party software or even log into your file manager and cheat the system that way. I just wanted to point out the fact that technically creative mode is not a thing in Subsistence, only survival. Now, just like Rust, you have to run around the map and actually look for specific farming items like fiber and such. Unlike 7 Days to Die, where everything is easily accessible in your view range, here in Subsistence you really have to spend a lot of time just running around trying to locate this one specific resource that you will need for your building purposes. You know how sometimes you look for stone in Rust, or even barrels for blueprints? Same applies here, except you look for crates instead of barrels, and luckily they're not being monitored by AIs. Another reason I brought up Rust is simply because almost everything in this game has to be crafted by you. There is no skill tree or blueprints in Subsistence, however you will find yourself crafting a lot. Some advanced items will require a workbench and other advanced mining procedures. If you're more like a casual gamer and love the grind, Subsistence will not disappoint you. Unlike Rust, instead of protecting your base from other players, you will have to defend your base from AIs. And here's what I find pretty cool about Subsistence. Once you place a BCU, the game will activate AIs randomly spread out on the map. They will start building their own bases or even small camping areas, and then they will start looking for you. Once they find your base, they will try to raid you and take your supplies. And so can you. Raiding in this game works exactly like Rust. You'd have to craft explosives to get through their base the easier way, or you could just run through shit ton of axes and pickaxes to get through their BCU. The choice is yours. Ammo in Subsistence is very hard to come by, and when you do find ammo, it's in little quantities, so make sure every shot counts. In this game, you don't have to worry about zombies or monsters, it's only hunters and the wildlife that you really have to pay attention to. The coolest thing about this game is the change in seasons, and that is the only thing that truly impressed me because I've never seen it anywhere else. You pick what month of the year you want to start with, and the game just randomly throws you in. In my experience, I would start in summertime and work my way through and give myself enough time to prepare for the winter time. Just like in real life, as season changes, so will your environment, and so should your approach to survival. For instance, water is very easily accessible during the summertime. It's nice warm weather, which means you could just run around naked if you really wanted to and nothing is going to bother you. However, once winter hits, the water is frozen, it is no longer accessible, and the temperature drops to the point where you will freeze to death if you don't have enough layers on your skin. In Subsistence, you really have to have a strategy to prepare yourself for the next day. I found myself being constantly paranoid about the next day, which is not a bad thing in a survival game. However, to some players it could be an overkill, which is completely understandable. As far as animals, they do feel robotic and have no life in them. When you encounter animals and they do attack you, there's almost no way of dodging that hit. You will most likely die unless you spray them with the gun and hit every single shot. When you do kill your first big animal, it will feel very rewarding at first until you try to skin them. then you will get disappointed because the size of the animal doesn't really count in terms of how much you'll get out of it as far as meat goes most of the time. For instance, you'd assume if you kill a bear you'll get plenty of cloth and meat, right? Well, 90% of the time you'll receive the same amount as killing a wolf. So if you think about it, why would you want to push a bear if you could just simply kill a wolf to get the same amount of meat, you know? Like, why even bother to go after a bigger animal if reward is pretty much the same as killing a small one, you know? Actually, let me take that back. The only time you'd want to kill a bear is when you need fat for fuel. But do not go after a bear thinking that you'd have more food because of it. You're better off just killing 3 rabbits instead. Because the game is developed by Unreal Engine, it is gorgeous. There were times I would literally just pause and stand still and pay attention to my environment as it slowly changes right in front of me. Like the very first time it snowed, it felt very special. Seeing water freeze underneath my base where I used to get water from, or even seeing birds migrate, not seeing bears during the wintertime because they hibernate during the wintertime. Details like these is what absolutely forced me to buy this game to begin with. Now, before I continue further on, it's important that you take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, because this is a beta. Anything I say can be changed later in the future, or it might never be the case. We just have to wait and see. Now, things I really appreciate about the game, and I think you would too. Number 1, seasons. I must admit, this is the only reason I bought this game. I have never seen anything like this. When you actually go through the year, there's no terrains. It doesn't matter where you build your base, you will experience every climate change the game has to offer, which is kind of cool. Number 2, kind of obvious, rust mechanics and raiding. It's fun to prepare yourself for a battle with explosives and go raid a base and pretty much take their stuff. Based on the size of the base that you raid determines how much loot you get out of it. So the bigger the base is, the more rewarding the loot is. Now this is kind of like Rust. It will take you a while to raid somebody. You would have to prepare yourself for a while. It's not like you come across a base and you're like, okay, I'm gonna raid this base now. No. Doesn't work like that. When you come across a base, you have to make sure you have explosives, enough C4s, enough bullets to fight, and then you raid them and take whatever is inside of it. Once you raid them, their base decays and they will never bother you again. Alright, number 3, the visuals and building. Despite how annoying the grinding process is as far as chopping down wood and stuff, the things you can build in this game, it just blows my mind. Let me just say that it's clear the developer truly cares about the building is Subsistence. You can build anything from fancy houses with elevators to just a simple ranch house if you really wanted to. It's pretty fun. Number 4, fun multiplayer concept. You know how Rust can be a lot of fun with a friend? Same thing here. Obviously you go against AIs instead of actual players, but still it's pretty fun, and see how creative both of you get together. As a matter of fact, I would recommend this game with a friend because otherwise it will just slow down your building process and your progression in the game pretty drastically. So if you want to save some time, unless you don't care, but I would highly suggest that you play this with a friend. Things I dislike. Let's go. Number 1, and it could be like the biggest one so far. The game is very draggy. As I mentioned so many times in this video, it's a lot more grinding than Rust, and that should probably tell you something. It took me about 6 hours, mind you, real time, 6 hours to build a 2-story house that's 7x4, and I found that to be frustrating, to the point where I just was losing interest because it was taking so much time. Like, most of my gameplay consisted of just running around chopping down wood from tree to tree. And I'm not even kidding you. And that's not even my problem. Like, there's actually a lot of people complaining about this. There is no easier way to get wood. Guess what? You start off with hitting that tree 6 times at the beginning of the game. Well, you'll always be hitting that tree 6 times regardless how much you've been playing the game. And you'll be getting the same amount of wood back. Once again, it does not play a factor how much you've been playing the game. It will constantly always give you the same amount of wood. You would assume that, you know, later in the game you progress and build like a chainsaw or something. Nope, you better make the most out of that axe, pal, because that's all you get. Don't get me wrong, you could find charcoal in caves for fuel, so you don't have to constantly rely on wood for fuel and everything. However, as far as building applies, you really need wood and nails, so be ready to just run around and hit those trees for the most of your gameplay. And Cold Games, if you're watching this, please make this not a full-time job for us, because we would really appreciate it. But anyways, this was the only thing that I found absolutely annoying and frustrating. I'm not hating on the game. The game has drastic potential. As a creator, as a gamer, a huge potential. And I'm making this video not for the sake of hating on this game. I love the game. This has a huge potential. As a content creator, as a gamer, as a consumer, however you want to name it, I love the game It's beautiful. It is gorgeous. But there are some things that just drive me crazy. So I figured I would make this video and either save you some money or convince you to buy this game. Depends how you want to look at this. I'm not hating on the game. I bought it. I played it. It's early access, which means everything can change in a heartbeat. But please keep in mind, progression is very slow and it sucks. Unless clearly you have more patience than I do, then that's a whole different story. But for the most part, majority of us hate it. This was your boy Roos, and I'm out, boys. Peace.